How can we identify if a dinosaur was a male or a female? Now, I'm sure that you already guessed this, but that is something that is extremely difficult to do. I mean, it's rare to find evidence that would support if an animal was a male or female in life, but there are a few examples that exist in the fossil record, mostly identified females, because overall it's kind of easier to identify if a dinosaur was a female than if it was a male. And the reason for that is because females, much like modern day birds, would develop medullary bone tissue when they were either getting ready to or had already laid their eggs. What medullary bone tissue does is supply extra calcium for hard eggshell development. So that means if you find that within the bones, that means that the animal was either pregnant or had already laid the eggs. A couple examples are actually tyrannosaurs, such as Bob Rex or the more recently discovered Barbara. And even recently, it seems that there might be medullary bone tissue present in the big owl specimen. Again, not a lot of examples, but some of them do in fact exist. But what about males? Have we been able to identify any males? Well, possibly. See, there are a few fossils that exist, mostly of oviraptorosaurs, that are sitting on top of their eggs, in a brooding behavior, similar to modern day birds. Because eggs are present, that means that the eggs were likely laid not too long ago, and that would mean that if this was a female, the medullary bone tissue would still be present. However, you cannot find it in some of these specimens, which implies that these ones that are sitting on top of the eggs are males, which has a lot of really cool implication about dinosaur behavior. It shows that at least with that particular species, both males and females would participate in taking care of the eggs, which overall is really cool. But again, that's something that's even more rare because you'd have to find the dinosaur actively in the middle of a behavior to identify if it was possibly a male. But I'm sure that some of you are thinking, wouldn't there be some skeletal hints that would clue us into what kind of dinosaur it is? And the answer to that is, hypothetically, yes. I mean, there's a lot of outward structures that are present on non-avian dinosaurs. A lot of them have crests, a lot of them have horns, a lot of them have these structures that are very much most likely used for display. And so they could have been examples of sexual dimorphism, like they would look different on the females than they would on the males. But when it comes to bones, it's difficult to identify that because you need to actually have a basis going into it. Like you would need to know if you're looking at a female first, and then you'd be able to identify what like a female crest looks like or a male crest would look like. But because you don't have that basis going in, it's difficult to say if this is an example of sexual dimorphism, or if the males look the same as the females, or if it's just an example of individual variation. Some things like that certainly do get a little bit more tricky, but as I mentioned before, there are still a few ways that you could possibly identify if a dinosaur was male or female, and it's just really cool overall.